So we're here today to talk a little bit about this book that we recently published. I work with a studio called Story Culture here in Goa. And this book that you can see actually grew from a question that we had started to ask at the studio, kind of building impact media, which was what makes humans decide to do something or not do something. And we were finding out again and again through our research and through the impact campaigns that we were running that humans don't respond to fact and actually are not very rational beings. And that most of the time, the reasons that anyone decides to do anything is because either they've been told a story or they are telling themselves a story that is making them feel something that results in an action. So we really got into this idea of media for good and impactful storytelling, and this book actually came as a response to how we can kind of apply that to climate change and what we were seeing as a strange normalization of climate change. Nobody seemed to be really worried about it anymore or optimistic about trying to solve it. We also saw that a lot of the stories that were existing were extremely Western-centric. So this is kind of where the book came from. And the first story in the book is by Prthvir here. So I'm going to give it to you to kind of introduce your story.
Can you hear me? So the story I've written is called The Solution, and what it presents is a Bombay that is
Yeah.
what it presents is a Bombay that is going through, I mean, we're a few years into the future where temperatures have risen dramatically, and because of which there is flooding as well that's happening in the city. So it centers around a boy who lives with his parents. He's just lost his job, and he's kind of angry with rising inequality, climate change, government negligence, all of that, like everything that we are feeling today. However, one day the government does come up with a solution to climate change, and the solution they provide is that they've formulated a technology that turns everyone into fish, so that everyone, once the city goes underwater, they have a place to live. That's kind of the context of the story, and from there it goes into, what action one can take. It talks about even generational responses to these things. The prime focus of the story is the relationship between him and his parents, who are a little more compliant to what the government wants to do, and his rage, which is a central issue with him. But that's the general context of the story. I don't know if anyone's read it, but if you haven't, then I think a lot of questions over here will give you a little hint into it, and hopefully it'll get you to read it.
Yeah. So I mean, to start off with, when I first read Prithvir's story, the idea that somebody could be asked to turn into a fish, and that most people in the city were kind of like okay with it, seemed absurd. But then I thought about the many absurd things that we've been asked to do, the many absurd stories that we've all accepted, like just because we want to keep living with some sense of normalcy in the world, and it didn't seem that absurd anymore. So I guess the first thing I want to ask is where the idea came from at all for a story like this.
I mean, it's kind of what you've touched upon, which is that I think we have been through so much crisis over the last many years, and the funny thing is that the response to it from government especially, and I was thinking about policy reaction to a lot of these things, and the first thing that comes to mind is during COVID, the government asking us to bang our thalis outside our balconies, right? But this is not a unique thing. This is embedded into policy formulation in India, at least the way I see it, at least for the common person. I'm not like a policy expert or anything. But absurd responses to real problems is something that I was constantly kind of at the top of my head. And I think we see that a lot with the current government that exists in India. Recently, even in Bombay, the environment minister of the city, of the state, was talking about mangrove destruction on the coast of Mumbai. And what she said was that the way soldiers sacrifice themselves on the border is how mangroves are sacrificing themselves for our city, at the borders at the coastline of the city as well. So,
Absurd.
so like this absurdity has become so normalized, right? There's this whole idea that, okay, can you even do satire anymore, or is anything real anymore? And that was kind of what I wanted to capture. So even when the idea that okay, you turn into fish, I didn't want to present the idea as something interesting or whatever, something that's central to the story, or oh my god, this is an amazing thing. Everyone takes it in their stride, like it's a normal thing that happens. And I think if we have to take larger policy decisions like demonetization, right? Like it's something that is completely, we are feeling the effects of it even today, 10 years later, and it's something that we just, sure, we're angry about it, but we live with it because, like you said, there is this semblance of normalcy that we want to live with. And I think that's kind of, I wanted to juxtapose that with something so absurd that it really makes you think about like how we really prepared for any of this. That's essentially where it came from, yeah.
And why Bombay? Was there like a specific reason?
That's the city I know. Like it's and also because I think it is very much at the precipice of destruction, and we're seeing it every year, right? Whenever the monsoons come, half the city is underwater. Like we are actually living the reality of what the story presents as something in the future. This is normal. Every monsoon, we are expected to live underwater. We are expected to wade through floods. We are expected to whatever. So it's and it just feels like a very apt place to represent the larger issue of climate change, at least in our country, the way I see it, city-wise. Yeah.
That's true actually, because when I was just like thinking about this talk a little bit, I was it made me think a lot about how Bombay is such a absurd city. In its existence, it is absurd. In its insane inequalities, it is absurd, and it made me feel a little bit like the kinds of like speculative storytelling we're doing has gone from being predictive to descriptive at this point. We're not really talking about something that's outside of the realm of like reality, right? So within that, one thing that I wanted maybe to get into a little bit is, was there a choice consciously for this to be absurdist or in a way funny, or is that just something that you naturally got into?
I mean, there was a choice to be absurd. Like I said, like the idea was to juxtapose normal reaction to something completely insane. So that was part of the idea. And again, like it becomes difficult because this is stuff that is happening, right? So the idea of the ridiculousness was very much there right from the start, that this needs to be as stupid as can be. And funny, I don't know. I mean, I'm funny, I guess. I don't really go right and think, okay, this needs to be a funny story.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I don't even think it's that funny. I think it's kind of sad. But I guess the situation is so ridiculous that it does evoke laughter and humor. But I think it's more like you're laughing at yourself a little bit. That okay, this is where we're at, and it's funny because it's real. Funny because it's true.
Funny because it's true, yeah. So one thing about the story which we're going to be doing a reading from it a little bit later, plus if you get the book you'll see, is that it also has kind of like a B story about, I mean it's weird to say B story within like a short story, but it has a B story about this like billionaire who's like a neighbor of the protagonist, and his mansion that he and his family don't even live in, but has a door that's really expensive. And that door is then they're spending a lot of money making sure that door doesn't catch fire, right? Whereas, at the same time, everybody else is kind of agreeing to kind of turn into fish, which is, I think, really like not even that far from reality, like depiction of the class inequality that we see, especially in places like Bombay. And like within that, I think it's interesting to have something inorganic, as in not alive versus alive. And a lot of science fiction does this where it depicts climate within a landscape, but yours, it is both the space and the body as well. So was that something that you realized you were doing when you were writing it?
Yeah, I think so. I've written all sorts of climate fiction in different mediums, or I've attempted to at the very least. And I think what was very central to me is that I don't want to present climate change as this huge disaster. And I think that was the thing that even that has changed. I think everyone is now aligned to what I'm thinking now. But I think like 10, 15 years ago, climate change movies were these disaster movies, right? Think of Hollywood films like The Day After Tomorrow, or even recently there was Annihilation and things like that. Like these are movies that have huge action and huge whatever.
Set pieces,
Yeah. But I wanted to write something, and even in general when I write about climate or any sort of issue, the idea is to integrate how this seeps into your everyday, and that aspect of it is very, very important to me. So even if we're talking about a billionaire who is protecting himself very differently from how the common person can, this is something that inequality needs to be felt at a very everyday level. So there are scenes where the characters face to face with what's happening right outside the mansion, or just to give context, like the idea is that this billionaire is someone who is on his way to becoming the world's first trillionaire, and a lot of the reasons he's becoming that are taking actions that are obviously affecting the climate. But I'm going to spoil the story throughout this entire thing. We'll just make it easier. But he's also involved in the technology that is turning people into fish. So that despite people living in an ivory tower, the way they impact on ground life in a very, very literal sense is something that I did consciously think of. Like that was the point of it. Like while we may be economically very far off, the impact of one decision that man makes could change generations of lives. So that was very, very important in terms of talking about the inequality, because that was again another theme that I thought was important, especially while setting it in Bombay, because I think climate change is also an inequality problem. It's also whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I think what I was getting at a little bit more is the body as a site of that impact,
right,
as opposed to the landscape, right?
Yeah.
Because we see a lot of especially in films, like you see forest fires, or you see like land getting cracked, and you're like, oh my god, this is what it is. But like humans, our bodies becoming like the site of that change, and especially after the pandemic, like we see it so much that it's sickness, and also in the story they refer to it as an infection, which I find really interesting as well. So I kind of want to speak
right,
on
yeah,
that.
yeah. So actually the pandemic is the prime reference, right? Like that. If one really has to think about, if we are to think about the pandemic as a climate change problem, right? It has happened because of human-animal interaction, which may not have been as common, let's say, many years ago. So the closing of those boundaries, or those boundaries closing in together, is the reason why now suddenly we have pandemics, or we're having interaction with diseases that we've never heard of.
Yep.
Or there are glaciers melting in the Arctic, so that they're releasing gases that might kill us all later on. But
Fun.
but yeah, like the body being a site of this action is primarily, again, why the fish thing is true, right? Like this is the ultimate end to it. Either your body withers away and dies, or there's a solution to it that makes you delay the problem. But there's no solution. Like this is happening. Like I like to think of myself as an optimist, but I don't think we're getting out of this. Like it's there are ways to delay it and things like that. But the way things are right now, you have one or two options. And in this this story, the option that the people are given is either wither away and die, or turn into a fish. And anyway, the world is going underwater. You'll survive a little longer there.
It's interesting that you said the words, the solution, which is also the name of the story. I found that quite loaded, because I feel like at this point also, even if I speak to when I speak to my grandparents, or like people who are now I think have committed themselves to a certain simplistic way of thinking, because it's just easier to do, right? I think there is this like solutionism angle where there is a belief that one dramatic intervention is going to solve everything. That it's not like a series of small, difficult choices every day, every hour, every minute that is going to take us to at least a better reality. It is that they're going to just like say this is the way, and then it'll all be different, right? Is that something that you also intended with the title as well?
Yeah, I mean the title is sarcastic, right? Like
it's not, because there is no solution.
I mean, so again, spoiling the story, sorry. But the only action that the lead character takes towards the end of the story is that he manages to throw a bomb at the billionaire's house, right? And nothing really happens apart from the door, the valuable door being damaged. But the funny thing I was thinking about this like yesterday was just 4 days ago, I don't know if anybody knows, but someone threw a Molotov cocktail at Sam Altman's home in the US, right? And I thought, wow, I knew this would happen. And because I think eventually that is the only thing someone can do, right? Like it's, I'm not advocating for violence, but when there is something that is threatening your life, when people are talking about it in these doomer ways, it's only natural for someone to defend themselves, right?
Yeah.
And it's at the end of the day, it's a drop in the ocean. This character throws a bomb at this billionaire's house, nothing happens.
Yeah.
Nothing happens apart from his rage kind of, having an outlet for a few minutes.
Yeah.
But that is kind of what, sorry, what was the question?
That's fine. That's so interesting. The question was more about like solutionism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we're talking about solutions as well, nobody has a real solution apart from these like instances of these eruptions, basically, right? Sometimes they come in forms of violence, like in this story and like with the case of the Sam Altman guy. But it also sometimes comes in the way of, let's say, mobilization towards policy change, or it may come in the form of damaging art in art galleries, whatever. Like there's no sustained movement as such because everywhere it's happening so differently, right? Like just few days ago, not few days ago, as we speak in Odisha, there are tribal villages, fighting the police and fighting the army because it is land grab. And again, we term these things land grab, and these are all climate change problems. These are all problems of climate, and I think, and we don't term them as such, which is why there's no, I think, global movement against this, because everywhere it's being it's happening in different ways. So the solution, the solution that the government comes up with is a blanket solution, which I don't know if it's something that can happen or exists, or I don't know. But the idea is that we are constantly searching for a blanket solution. We want the easy answer, right? Okay, this one thing we do, and you know what, everything is going to be fine. Because movies work like that, and we want things to work like that all the time. So yeah, the title is sarcastic. There is no solution as such, but there is action. And I think there is a difference between those two things. Action is sustained resistance,
exactly,
right?
Yes,
and
exactly.
you can fight against it in any sort of way, and maybe there will be minor improvements, there will be major improvements sometimes, but action is what I think that's why that scene at the end of the story is very important for me, which is that he does take action. Even if it doesn't lead to anything material, it is a form of expression.
Mm-hmm.
And that expression is important, I think. And that if it leads to any sort of action or whatever, I think that for me was very important to put in the context of the book rather than just being like, oh, everything sucks.
That's true. It's interesting that you spoke about his action as the throwing of the bomb, which is true also. But another very important action he takes is that he doesn't do it. He doesn't agree to transform into a fish. Right, so his refusal is also an action, which is also an action that we have, and we should use more.
Yeah.
So another thing that I thought we could get into, and after this we can probably move to the reading. I think, because you mentioned Sam Altman as well, and we've been in this Sam Altman, Elon Musk of the multiverse, and it's starting to feel like everyone is looking for this radical technological solution to something, right? And it's not technology that has already existed. All of the ways in which we have been living our lives has been through technology, but it's this new technology. There has to be something shiny and bright and exciting that is going to be the only way that everything is going to get better. And I feel like this is an example, like the story very well explains what that looks like, which is that I would rather choose this thing that is alien, but it feels like because of that it will be more effective. than asking them to use their water more equally, right? So is that was that like a choice as well?
No, not consciously, but I mean, I do think that that's something we are thinking, right? Like, I think when I wrote the story, it was also just when AI was like, that's when DALL-E had become like this thing, right? So, maybe it was at the back of my head, possibly, but yeah, like I think people are looking at technology. So even now, when people are shilling AI to the world, they're talking about how it will free us, give us free time, and we will have universal basic income, and they're saying it will solve a lot of our problems, right?
Correct.
So yeah, like in that sense, this was. I mean, this as this was written, it turns out that it is exactly what you're talking about. But I wouldn't say it was like I can't. It wasn't like consciously on my head,
Sure.
but clearly, subconsciously, everyone's thinking the same thing, and that's made its way into the story.
That's true, yeah. I mean, it made me think a lot about, and I was going to ask you this as like a warm-up question, but I can ask it now as well. When I was thinking about climate fiction, it made me think that cli-fi as a term is new. It's from like maybe 2010, 2012 is when it kind of came into mainstream. Not mainstream, but like literary mainstream. But climate fiction has always existed in the sense that people have been responding to the world in the way it moves, in the way that nature is balanced with human progress for a very long time. And a story that I thought about was The Ones That Walk Away from Omelas, which I think for me has always been a climate fiction story in a sense, because it's about the fact that there is someone who needs to be somehow disadvantaged for the rest of us to have a certain kind of life. And I feel like that inequality is still a climate problem. So is there a story that, in any form of media, that you were thinking about, that inspired you?
Not maybe not climate related, but there are stories that take on a certain form to talk about something larger, right? Like I don't like to name drop, but like there's a lot of Kafka, there's a lot of Eugene Ionesco that I used to read, where they take these absurd situations and but talk about something that's a lot more real. And I always and that's why science fiction is great, right? Like you're talking about something in the present,
Yeah.
but but you're giving it a form that is very, very different. That being said, like a climate change book I really like is this book called The Ministry for the Future by this guy called Kim Stanley Robinson. So in that book, the premise is great. Like there is the UN has set up an organization that cares for that's basically a representative of populations of the future. So any decision that is taken in the present world has to be consulted with these people who are representing generations that are to come. That's a great book, which also ends in violence, by the way. But but that those are the kind of stories that I'm looking at, right? Like it's I want to move away from neo-realist, realist storytelling and kind of give something a maximalist take, so that it really kind of hits you in the face, and hopefully that makes an impact.
Yeah, I think we should all be trying, as writers, we should all be trying to also write more populist stories, because we need people to pay attention, and it's not always in our best interest to be niche in that sense. So one last reflection, I guess, from me was I was thinking about like Jurassic Park, because that also to me was climate fiction in the sense that it made me think a lot when I was quite young about the unchecked, selfish progress of science versus what is probably right for the harmony of an island or a space, and like letting nature be the way it was meant to be. And I think this book and the use of like speculative fiction is always to move towards something that is so absurd that it makes us kind of pay attention. Do you feel like we have gone past a world where that's even possible anymore?
Maybe. I don't know. Let me think about it. But instinctively, I want to say yes. But then, what are we writing?
Exactly.
I think that's the challenge right now, especially with English writing in India. I find it very difficult to um, give a reason for its existence, to be honest. And it's 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 difficult, I think. Ask the question again.
Maybe I'll ask it in a different way. Maybe, I mean, if anybody in the audience also wants to weigh in, you can. We're talking about why we need climate fiction, which I think at the center of it is why do we need stories to change people's minds, which I think on some level we do believe that, because we're writers, we wouldn't not believe that if I'd be doing this. But is it even possible is my question. Is it,
I mean, I think it is absolutely possible. But what I think I was trying to say is that I think it's also important to figure out who we're speaking to, right? I think the English writing in India now is speaking to a very small audience. We don't have a large audience. However, I think it's an influential audience. And I also think it is a passive audience. Like, we like to read and be happy that we read it. So I think it comes down to taking responsibility as a writer. What are you writing for? And this doesn't mean everything you write has to, have some, like, okay, after I write this, I'm going to start a revolution. But I mean that when I do think that it's important to kind of place yourself in the present time and respond to that. And whether it is, and that includes the language you're writing in, that includes the story you're writing about, that includes the people you're speaking to. And I think these are questions that are more existential than anything else, and those are things that I think writers who are writing in English in India need to maybe discuss amongst themselves. Is that, what is it that we're doing here? Like, what are we are now not very relevant. In the international market, the books that have won the international book are translated books from India. We have not really seen a writer living in India writing a book and, let's say, winning a prestigious award outside. So even if it's Anita Desai, she doesn't live here. The only writer who's left living here is Arundhati Roy. And she's stopped writing fiction, or she rarely writes fiction. So, so that's what I mean. Like, it's about, and this is a question that I kind of deal with, and I don't have an answer to this. Is why am I writing, and what's happening here? Like, I like to write, yes, but to what end? So you were saying that I think we should write populist stories. I think I'd love to have my own niche, but I want that niche to have 1 billion readers, right? Like, that's the point. Like, so I don't have an answer to the question, but fundamentally, I just think we should have conversations about what are we doing here. And why do we need climate fiction? Is because I also think writers have a very different relationship to people than, let's say, journalists or researchers or everyone else. Everyone is, I think writers, we were just having a conversation before we were sitting here with a few researchers, and I was saying that we are fundamentally stupid. Like, we are not smart people, but we are very emotional people, writers in general. And I think that is something that people can respond to. Facts are scary, and even emotion can be scary, but we have a different channel through which we speak to people. And I think that's a very big responsibility when we are writing climate fiction. And I think these are things that people need to think about. And to be frank, I don't know if I was thinking about these things when I was writing this. I wrote this about maybe 2.5 years ago. And I do think I have changed. I do think the world has also changed. And now I'm starting to think about these questions a lot. And I've read this story now again, over and over again. And each time I read it, I have a different response to it. I read it today morning again, and I had a different response to it. And actually, weirdly enough, today was the first time I had a positive response to it after a very long time. But yeah, I mean,
yeah. I mean, I think if you ask me, because it's working separate. Anyway, I think if you ask me also, because I'm a writer first, but I've been working with social culture a lot on our impact campaigns, which is essentially taking our impact media out to people and telling them why this is like worthy of their attention, right? Because everything has to be worthy of your attention to be seen at this point. And it makes me think of what you said earlier, which is this like ridiculous story about how the mangroves are soldiers. The other side is using it. The other side is very good at that. So we have to be good as well. So I feel like sometimes we're asked things like, there's this one larger conversation about how a lot of climate work goes towards PLU, which is people like us, right? It doesn't actually impact anybody beyond our tiny circle who already kind of agrees with the same thing. So we need to get better at it, but we can't stop doing it, is what I think so, yeah.
Yeah, actually, this PLU thing is great. I've never heard of it before.
Yeah.
But it's really good because the only people I can speak to are people like me. But can I still challenge? Like,
Correct.
can I either offer a different assessment? Can I critique my own people and make them uncomfortable? If all the writer is doing is comforting their own bubble, then I mean, that's what your purpose is different. And you can go ahead and do that. It's okay. But I'm not personally. I don't want to be that writer. And for me, if I am speaking to people like me, like you, I think we're all on the same page on most of the stuff that we think about. But I want what I write to still, I don't know, make you pissed off at me. Like, why did you write that? And what are you talking about? I think that needs to happen. There has to be a shift. We cannot be comfortable with our knowledge. We cannot be comfortable with our point of view. That yes, I think things are bad and fine.
Yeah.
I think I need to be able to challenge that. And I think the first step to doing that is me challenging myself. And once I answer those questions, then I can pose questions to other people. And it's hard. Like, I don't know. Like, going back to what I said before, I don't know the answer to anything.
It's a practice.
Yeah,
it happens,
it's a practice.
It happens in time. It happens also with the support of others in your space. So, shall we do a reading of your story?
Sure. I'll read like a page. So I'll give you a little bit of context before I read this. The first scene is a fire. There's been it's heated up so much that a building has caught fire, where our main character, whose name is Ravi, has just kind of helped his parents out of the building. They've just found out that it's going to take a while to quell the flames and things like that. And then we're now, a few hours later, they're back at home. The north-facing wall in the Kumar's living room is charred black from the fire. Ash sticks to the paint like moss. Ravi studies the designs that the flames have left behind, wavy, large and stark. It spans big and ominous over his head, like a black spectre of doom. He wonders how this will affect his sleep. It has been 5 months since Ravi moved into his parents' living room. The one-bedroom apartment afforded him little choice. It was either there or in the kitchen, and Ravi hadn't liked the idea of sleeping near food. He turns around and sees his parents watching the news on the television, seated on the couch that doubles as his bed at night. The TV barks at them. It barks at them about floods, about hurricanes, about heat waves. The apocalypse is an always developing story, but neither parent seems worried. They watch the news about Kolkata sinking into the ocean with the same blank enthusiasm they have for toothbrush advertisements. Remember when we went to Kolkata and you forgot me in the metro? Mrs. Kumar asks Mr. Kumar as she chops bhindi on a cutting board she has propped up on her lap. I did not forget you, you forgot to get off the metro, her husband replies. On the TV, a drone captures Victoria Memorial's dome peeking through the ocean water that has swallowed the rest of it. Ravi watches this and feels his head throb. A hot surge builds inside him, rising from his gut, traveling through his spine and lighting a flame at the top of his skull. He clenches his jaw, hoping his teeth can cushion the rage he wants to expel. It doesn't take much for Ravi to get angry, but nothing seems to tick him off more than a television delivering the news. Fires are now commonplace in Mumbai. Most of the city's buildings are built with materials that are not meant to withstand the temperatures that the city experiences. In fact, temperatures are so high across the country that the government has decided to withhold the exact numbers from the people. The numbers, they believe, will create unnecessary panic. But there's little they can do to stave off the dread on actual fire rings. At first it was just the forest, but now an abnormal rise in temperature is enough to also trigger a reaction that heats up a building so much it spontaneously catches fire. Homes turn to ashes in a matter of minutes. Doesn't any of this piss you off, he snarls. His parents turn their necks to look at him. Any of what, his mother asks. Ravi gestures at the TV and then gestures at the black wall behind him. 3 fires in 1 month. It's Kolkata today, tomorrow it's us. The Prime Minister once informed the people that these fires were nothing but infections, like blocked noses and dry